talking him last Thursday, and I had a chance to mention them. I did see him. Good.
The administrator will be
Okay, let's get started. Let me have your attention. Let's get started. Welcome to the University of Tennessee Nuclear Engineering Department Seminar Program. Before I introduce today's speaker, we have some distinguished guests that I'd like to introduce. First of all, we have a very good collaboration with an institute in Brazil. It's called IPEN. And we currently have two visiting scholars from Brazil, Sergio, who's been introduced in the past, and then a new one, Rosario Pina. And Rosario, would you stand up? Let's give her a round of applause. Okay. We also have, for those students here who are interested in DOE scholarships and fellowships, we have the manager of the DOE Scholarship and Fellowship Program. It's Mr. Craig Williamson, who is from his affiliation with the Medical University of South Carolina. Craig? We also have a board member for Bionutrix, who's a physician at UT Hospital, and it's Dr. Trent Nichols. Trent? And I believe those are most, well, I see Colin. Colin, let me introduce Colin West. Colin West is a colleague, a retiree from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, who helps us considerably from time to time. Colin, would you? I think everybody else are standard people that we have in our department. Okay. Real standard people. Today's speaker is Mr. George Dilworth, who is the president and CEO of Bionutrix. In addition to being a technical colleague, he's also a friend. He and I occasionally play golf together, and we enjoy each other's company in that way. George is a UT engineering graduate. He received a BS in mechanical engineering in 1958. He joined TBA in 1960 and was there for 28 years, rising through the ranks until he became Assistant General Manager, which is the #2 position at TBA, just below the Board of Directors. He held that position for 2 years. After retiring from TBA in 1988, he joined TCRD, which is a research and development organization, and out of that organization came Bionutrix, which is a company that has the lease on the tower shielding reactor, which is the subject of the presentation today. In fact, it's entitled, this topic is New Life for a Grand Old Lady, will be shared by many, and that grand old lady is the tower shielding reactor at Oak Ridge. George, welcome.
I would like to explain the title a little bit. The term grand old lady, if any of you have ever read the history of the tower shielding facility, there's a poem in the front of that history that was written in the mid-90s that refers to the tower shielding facility as the grand old lady. And this is a picture showing the four towers. Each of these towers are 350 feet tall. This facility was used in the late 50s and early 60s in nuclear aircraft research program. They used to raise this reactor up about 250 feet high between those towers, and the first two towers on this side, and then the back two they'd have experiments raised up and like mock-up of cockpits, and they were trying to determine a number of things, such as what would be the exposure of an aircraft crew nearby an nuclear explosion, or could you actually power an aircraft with a nuclear reactor? What kind of shielding would you have to have? those kind of things were being done at the time. We have leased this facility about 26 acres that surrounds the center. Where the reactor itself is in right there in the big beam shield, and we'll see more of that a little later. And the reference I made to a grand old lady offers new life to many. Well, to begin with, our principal banner that we've been flying now since 1994 really is to try to make this area, Oak Ridge and Knoxville, an international center to develop and expand boron neutron capture therapy for treatment of cancer. We're broadening that banner, or we're raising several other banners with us because we recognize that that's a narrow purpose, and we want to get as many people behind us, and we want to be able to make this reactor useful to a broader group, and especially the University of Tennessee, and even most especially this department. And I'd like to thank Lee and this department for the support they have given us through the years, and in recent times when there's more of an effort by universities across the country, especially in the Southeast, to try to find reactors or get a new university operating and based reactor, well, not necessarily the base of the university, but a university operated reactor. We kind of fit in with this need. We want to be able to have this reactor to be able to be used by this university and other universities, especially in the Southeast. I will tell you a little bit more about the background. The research began in 1954. The reactor that's there now, there was an earlier reactor there through the 50s, and the reactor that's there now began operation in 1960, TSR-2, and it had a mission of 32 years supporting AEC and DOE's broad research in all different kinds of reactors and types of reactors. Was kind of the benchmark facility to develop shielding codes and transport codes that's in use throughout the world today. The design is unique, and it produces high-quality neutron beams, and it discontinued its research and testing operations in '92, and that kind of coincided with DOE's advancement of new reactor types. When those programs ended, the main missions of the tower ended with it, even though there were people in other places in the world that would like to still use it. This is a cutaway of the reactor. And it's relatively small. The reactor itself, down at the bottom here, it's about 3 feet in diameter. It's kind of like a big medicine ball. It's controlled with a central ball mechanism in the center of it there, and its fuel is a spherical fuel on the outside. Looks kind of like orange peels on an orange. And it's made of enriched uranium and aluminum alloy plates. The vessel itself is aluminum, and it's operated through its lifetime at 1 megawatt thermal, even though it's designed for 5 megawatt thermal. So our plans would be to try to get it licensed at 3 megawatts. Larry Tummel is associated with us in our company, and myself in late '94, while we were at TCRD, we had some relationships with some people in Washington and New York, and told us about this patient trials approaching operation at Brookhaven National Lab, and this doctor that was leading the trials there was asking questions about, is there anything in Oak Ridge that would be a source of neutrons? For this therapy, I think most of you probably know that it's not something that's easily hospital-based, because you have to have the quality neutron beam, and that requires a reactor nowadays. You know, the dream and the hope is someday there would be accelerators that could be hospital-based that would produce a quality beam that you could use. But we formed our company in '96, and it was inside of the Tennessee Center for Research and Development, incubated there for a year or two, and then about a year, and then we spun it out, and that's when I left TCRD to try to get this company started. We got a 30-year lease with the Community Resource Organization of East Tennessee and the Department of Energy for the TSF, and we got this lease in May of '98, and it has been in standby condition, and the site was cleaned up, and then DOE has kept it in standby condition since then. BNCT, or boron neutron capture therapy, requires two things. It's a binary therapy, or a binary treatment. It requires a neutron beam of epithermal neutrons with energy levels depending upon how deep the cancer is and the size of the cancer, energy levels that will allow the beam to remain epithermal until it gets to the tumor site, which then you want it to be thermal. So there's been models, and this department, Larry, has worked with Trent here and with people at Idaho developing models for various kinds of tumors in this program in the past, not for us, but for DOE. We also are doing research in compounds along with the University of Tennessee, because you have to develop a way to get the boron-10 to the tumor. And now, throughout the world, most everybody is using a compound they call BPA. I think there's still a BSH compound being used by one place, but most people are using BPA, which is amino acid that's got the boron linked to it, and it carries it to the fast-growing cancer cells at a ratio of about 3 or 4 to 1 with the present compounds. Our goal is to try to better that by several orders of magnitude. So you're able to get in the tumor maybe as much as 10 times as much boron as you would have in good tissue. In 1998-99, we developed a business plan. We were following the research here in the United States and around the world, and the trials that had started. We attempted through several agents to find funds to design, license, modify, and construct this facility, and we engaged consultants to advise and help us in this, and we were getting people interested. We developed an enterprise model, which we've since modified. I'll show it to you in a minute. But in 1998, which was the fall after we had leased it in the spring, we had a valuation firm that spent about a month, I guess, looking at detail at the facility, at the company, at the potential market for this and need, and they valued the company, mainly the lease rights that we had, at $35 million at the time. We had informal discussions with both NRC and FDA on how we can proceed when the reactor was operational. We were assured by FDA that we could start doing either trials or treatment at the same level of protocol development that Brookhaven National Lab had advanced to. And while we were doing this, Brookhaven was in phase 1 trials, and they were looking good. In 2000, we applied for an SBR phase 1 grant to develop these boron compounds, and were successful in receiving that grant, and developed 2 compounds that, and we were using the University of Tennessee chemistry department as our principal contract provider for lab and materials and equipment services, and we hired a chemist to do it. But we developed 2 compounds during that period of time. One of them was excellent in the sense that it cleared the vascular system relatively soon, and it stayed in the tumor, and this was done on mice, stayed in the tumor 6 hours, which gives you a window of treatment time that is what we're looking for. Now what we're looking for is a higher concentration or ratio of tumor to good tissue. In 2000, all reactors at Brookhaven National Lab were shut down, and I can talk about the reasons of why this was done, but I won't bore you with that. But because of that, it cut the kind of legs out from under our business plan, which was counting on entering in to treatment at the point that they had reached in Brookhaven. And the way we had projected it and talking with them, it looks like they were going to be through phase 3 trials or more by the time we got to that. We were awarded in 2001, our company, an STI phase 2 grant last summer, and we are involved in that with the University of Tennessee Chemistry Department now, and we will be utilizing university health systems staff and people in the end of this research, but we hope to develop up to 20 compounds that are cancer-specific to more cancers than what's been applied before. Continuing of trials in the U.S. has been impacted, as I said, by that delay. It's delayed us 4 to 6 years as far as a business plan would be concerned. We'll be using new compounds when we start our trials. We have now, and we're real-time restructuring our approach to try to get this facility operating. I'm talking a couple of 3 times a week with Lee and with Wayne McKay, the Senior Vice President for Research for the university, who is, by the way, also Chairman of the Board of University of Tennessee Research Corporation. Here is the enterprise model as we would visualize it today. Bionutrics, the company that has the lease, research park here, which would be on site, and it would be, I've used the term UT Center of Excellence. I don't know if that's what they would call it or not, but in reality, that's what we would hope it would be. To be managed by UTRC, and that's new. That's I don't know how many students in here really know anything about the University of Tennessee Research Corporation, but it's a 501c3 wholly owned corporation, wholly owned by UT system, statewide. It is the holder of all the patents that is produced in the research here and in Memphis in the medical school. So any place that there's intellectual property, it's owned by UTRC. Dwayne McKay has a vision that he'd like to see that corporation be more than just a holder of intellectual property. He'd like to see it get into the actual management and being a catalyst to bring research programs to this area. So that's why he suggested that we put them there. New technologies that would come out of there would be funded by either grants from foundations or corporations or local, state, and federal governments. Could be research contracts from corporations. And we would end up Bionutrics because of the fact that the funds to convert it would flow to UTRC. We would be willing, and we're working on an agreement now, where we would pay royalty fees on a long-term basis from income that we will eventually receive through the market of clinical application of this site or other businesses, purposes that we might have to industry and government and universities and using a reactor for other than medical purposes. Eventually, the company would find some strategy to bring capital funds to build out a more extensive facility for treatment. There's a master agreement that we're working on now with UTRC, commit both parties from long-term working relationships. They have the documents now to review. The initial federal funds, and we'll mention this again in a minute, would flow through UTRC. Some would go to UT, and those would be used partially by the chemistry department and partially by this department, with some defined roles that we would have in the concept training and so forth of how we want the facility to, well, for instance, what we need to do in refurbishing and converting this facility to make it user-friendly for the programs that this department would need, for graduate students to use to run experiments and this kind of thing. University health systems would definitely be defining how we should design the exposure room for the patients that would actually be treated there in the research. UTRC, under the master agreement, would engage our company under a management operating agreement to manage the site, refurbishment, conversion, and licensing, and the funds that would come to us to get that done would flow to local firms to help in the design and construction and licensing. I said before, we're going to pay royalty fees to UTRC, and they give us first right of refusal on intellectual property developed there. I'm pushing the right button. This is a mouse. BNI and UT together, with help from others around here, will need to market the tower shielding facility TSR2 reactor neutron source, especially in the first 2 or 3 years of operation. But we need to start doing that now. So market it, I mean, Lee knows that there's universities throughout the Southeast that need and looking for a reactor to use now. The beauty of it here is, in this case, the university won't have to own a reactor. When more and more universities, and Lee, you can help me on this, there's like 20 reactors left, 22, and maybe 10 years ago there was something like 80. So that's how many reactors have been shut down. More and more university administrations and presidents do not want the liability, or do not want to worry about the continuing funding of a reactor. So in this situation, the Department of Energy has the long-term legacy responsibility for this reactor to eventually dismantle it and take the fuel. The 30 years that we have, and it's a 10 years of a time renewable, this lease, we're a small company that has this responsibility, and then the university would have the use of it to bring in research, to do research, and without the obligation of the reactor itself. So it's a win-win situation for the University of Tennessee. We'll continue, as I said earlier, to attempt to raise private capital to build it out later. I'm going to skip this. I've said most of that. The neutron services business that's really out there right now. I mean, there's people that need the use of this now. There's a company, the chairman of our board, John Altscher of Altscher & Associates. Some of you know John and his staff. They pay about $500,000 a year on some of the contracts they have to get activation services, and it's getting harder and harder for them to do that, to activate blood or urine to determine if there's plutonium or some radioactive element, and so that's a business that this reactor could do. We're having a hard time now finding in our research a place that we can get some of the exposure we need on some of the animal testing that we're doing. And I know Lee and some of y'all are aware of other needs that people have. Material research, material examination that we can do at this reactor. Research, who can be involved there? UT and UT Battelle will be involved in cooperative research. Plans are to involve other members of the consortium, UT Battelle consortium, in research at the site. There's a large base of people that have done experiments at the tower shielding facility that are still at ORNL that would be eager to try to do other things there. And the hospital medical center UT will be involved in helping us, as I said earlier, to configure the patient aspects of this facility and also the implementation of the therapy. I've also already, I think, spoken of the fact that we're preparing this MOU. Ann Robertson, who is the president of UTRC, communicated with me Monday that she should have her part of it done within the next week. Congressman Duncan, when we met with him, requested us to prepare a proposal to request new federal funding in amount of $15.5 million for this project. We've been coordinating this with his staff now for about 2 months. They are very positive about it. Of course, we've got to now make sure that Congressman Watt, who is key to this because he's on the Energy and Water Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, most everything that comes to Oak Ridge, Zach's involved with. The sensitive thing is that everybody, whenever you ask for, quote, new money, everybody assumes or is afraid that they're going to take it out of one part and give it to another. And we don't want, it's the last thing we want done. We believe that Senator Frist, Senator Thompson will be very supportive of this because we've dealt with them in years past and they have been. And at the top levels of UT, we are expecting support to go to Congress because the money will flow through UT. So, in conclusion, this region has just a wonderful opportunity to try to bring together an international consortium, you might call it, that will, the consortium would be in this region, but it will have international reach, and it will interest people all over the world, where we'd come here and try to bring together around this facility the disparate resources that exist here now at the University and Oak Ridge National Lab and the Medical Center and other places into one unified desire to make this facility work. They have the capability and the research capabilities. Now, I don't know how we do it on time.
We're doing fine.
Okay. I have some other slides here that I'd like to show you and then questions. In this show. Right, these are some supplemental slides that show a few more things that I think will be.
Start the show.
Yeah, I gotta start the show. Okay. Well, this is a ground level view looking from east towards the west of this reactor. Whoop. Take that. Well, I didn't mean to do that. I keep forgetting how to make this thing point. The reactor is right behind that port, right there. You should have seen this site, some of you did, before the Department of Energy removed all the experiment that they left here. Throughout all the years of operation, I don't believe anybody ever removed the equipment that was involved in it. experiment. It was really a sight to behold. But there were great big tanks of sodium that had been used in one of the later experiments that they had. But the Department of Energy got a contractor and moved almost all, so it's pretty clear. On this side of that, in this area here, would be where this facility here would actually be built, which would house, and it always looks bigger than it really is when you look at an architect's perspective, but it would house the reactor at the back of that facility, and then the medical aspects of it would be in there. Now that we're looking at this restructured thing, it's going to mean a little different facilities there to maintain lab space for people to do other experiments at this reactor. Here is a chart that shows the curve that would show the location and quality of the reactors that have been involved or been looked at for BNCT around the world. This is beam intensity here over on this side and beam quality. The further to the right-hand upper corner of this, the better quality beam you'd have for BNCT. Down here at the bottom is the MIT reactor as it's been in its history so far, where they did have patient trials going on, principally in melanoma and glioblastoma. And up at the upper right-hand corner, here's the MIT reactor after they installed, in the last couple of years, a fission converter plate that improves the quality of the neutron beam from that point down here up to there. So it's the best in the world, really. And if we look at others, this is the Petten reactor in the Netherlands. It's a facility doing BNCT patient trials now. It's a European common market reactor, and there's 7 nations, I believe, that's involved there. They've been doing their trials now, I believe, for 2 years. This is the Brookhaven National Lab Research Reactor, the one where 54, I believe, patients were treated through phase 1 trials before they shut that reactor down. This is a Finnish reactor that's been in operation about a year. There's another one that's not on here, which is a Swedish reactor that Trent and George Kabalka went to visit this past early fall, I believe. In fact, you were there during September the 11th. Had a hard time getting back, as I recall. This one here is the Washington State University reactor, where we sent some of our research to for it to be irradiated. This is the McClellan Air Force Base reactor that Congress funded about $27 million, I believe it is, to that reactor for it to be converted. They're still in a complicated arrangement of who is in charge. It's basically they wanted the University of California, Davis, but like I said earlier, universities don't really like to take responsibility for the reactor. I think SAIC is now the company that's been contracted to manage that facility. It is a multi-purpose facility. It'll still do research for the Air Force and materials, but it does have one area where a beam can be used for medical purposes. Okay. This is just a look at a cross-section through a plane of the reactor to show where the filter and collimator would be used at this reactor. Actually, it's out of scale because you'll be able to get the patient within about 3 feet of the reactor. This is an interesting slide here. This slide shows the patients that were treated at Brookhaven National Lab in their trials. From the time of diagnosis, these are the months till death. of these patients. Conventional therapy is this red line here. The average person from diagnosis that has this primary brain cancer, glioblastoma multiforme, with conventional therapy, which is radiation therapy and chemotherapy, this is their average or median survival time. You can see that the BNCT patients at Brookhaven, that there's about 75% of them that were above that survival time. The beauty of it, too, was the fact that if you were going with this conventional radiation, you went every day for 5 days a week for 6 or 8 weeks getting treatment. At the same time that the cancer was being treated, good brain cells were being killed and people would move into dementia. So their quality of life and the agony their families were going through were pretty tough. With this facility, you'd go for about 45 minutes of treatment, and that was it. And then you went home, and your quality of life was much, much better. Now in Japan, this is the therapy of choice for brain cancer. Not just glioblastoma, but for brain cancer. And the Japanese have a limited number of facilities that they can use, and Trent, I believe I'm right when I say they used to take U.S. patients and patients from other places, but now they've got a waiting list, and so you pretty much can't get into the Japanese. So they claim a number of cures of this horrible cancer, and without a doubt, the non-glioblastoma multiforme, the other kinds of brain cancers, many have they cured. Trent Nichols here was the attending physician of 5 or 7 patients, I can't remember, 7 patients from this area that went to Brookhaven or Harvard MIT. And so he personally, worked with families and patients on the kind of therapy they were getting. And I believe to every family, I believe, was very much thankful that their family member took this therapy rather than the conventional kind. And I'm sure afterwards that Trent would be glad to discuss that.
What is the protocol number?
These are protocol numbers across. That was how many fields of exposure they had. And it's interesting, the first 3 or 4 protocols had better success, and yet there were 3 fields used over here at the end, and there's only about a 50-50, about half. It's about the same as conventional therapy. But what was happening then is they were accepting patients with larger and deeper-seated cancers during the end of it rather than they did at the front. In other words, they deviated from the criteria, the protocol that was approved by FDA out of compassionate reasons. And so their research results, they could have and should have gone ahead and treated these people, but they shouldn't have counted them as part of the protocol that they were trying to plan. At least that's my opinion. That's what's happening overseas.
And those are dose escalations. They really started out with the second protocol, and each one was, I think, a 25% increase in total dose.